How you doing tonight, John?
Oh, I am living the dream, as always, all day, every day. It's always a good day when we get to watch something in the vein of my favorite genre, horror. Even though this is a thriller, because you are a chicken, and we compromised off of doing a true horror movie.
Okay, before we get into that, is the Invisible Man, the 2020 version, is that technically in the horror genre?
It does fall in the horror genre, but it's really much more of a psych thriller.
Yeah, that's really what I got. And you might call me a chicken, but I really didn't find anything about this movie scary
Yeah, that's why we picked this
at
movie,
all.
because you wouldn't do an actual horror film.
Okay. I've seen Gone Girl. Gone Girl is way more of a horror movie than this. Like, that's a suspense on your edge.
Not even.
What are you talking about?
Not
That one
even.
kept you on. I'm not even gonna compare this one to Gone Girl, but
We have. I can already tell, and I knew this coming in. We have some very stark disagreements about this movie. Um, and I think you already said it, but just in case it was missed, the movie we are talking about today is The Invisible Man 2020, by Leigh Whanell, starring I think it's Elizabeth Moss. That's her name.
yep,
Um,
Elizabeth Moss as Cecilia Cass.
yeah. So, um,
And I
yeah, I think we
vaguely
got a
know her.
lot. I think we got a lot to talk about on it. So,
Yeah. Well, I mean, starting with that, the cast. I mean,
yeah.
I vaguely know her, Elizabeth Moss, maybe some from some other movies.
Okay.
But other than that, oh, okay, no, wait. Atlas Hodge. I've known him from some other stuff. He's more well known in my brain than Elizabeth Moss, to be honest. Actually,
Really?
yeah,
That's fascinating. Elizabeth Moss is very much riding a like career high right now. A lot of people know her from a number of things. Probably her, I don't want to call it her breakout role, but like the role that really put her in the mainstream was A Handmaid's Tale on Hulu.
Okay, we'll see. I haven't
That's what
seen
everybody knows her from.
Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, so
I
that
haven't either, but there was a time when you couldn't, look in any direction without seeing an ad for A
for
Handmaid's Tale
Handmaid's
on
Tale.
Hulu.
This is true. This is true. I probably know Atlas Hodge. I was pulling up his filmography there. He was in some Black Mirror episodes, it looks like. So that's probably what I actually know or was connecting him with.
Gotcha, gotcha. Can you remind me who he plays in this?
He is James Lanner. Oh gosh, I probably butchered that last name. San Francisco police detective.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
Sydney's father.
Yeah,
So in this movie, Elizabeth's, or I'm sorry,
best
Cecilia
friend.
Cass's best friend. Yep.
Yeah. The only thing I know him from is this movie and Straight Outta Compton. He
Okay.
plays he plays MC Ren in Straight Outta Compton.
Straight out Compton.
And he just got cast as this is gonna date when we recorded this episode. But he just got cast like a day or two ago and confirmed as Hawkman in Black Adam starring The Rock.
That's a whole nother conversation we're going to have off. Haven't heard of that. That sounds interesting, though. I'm
It's
intrigued.
a DC movie. It's
Well, that's
Shazam, Black Adam.
okay. Okay. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. We'll do Shazam sometime and dive into that.
Oh yeah. Shazam was a decent movie, but yeah. So the Invisible Man. Essentially, the plot. I'll just kind of read the notes here. Cecilia Cass is trapped in a violent, controlling relationship with wealthy optics engineer and businessman Adrian Griffin. One night, Cecilia drugs Adrian with diazepam and escapes his highly secured home, assisted by her sister Emily. And I say highly secured home in quotes because when I was watching this movie, I was thinking to myself, there's nothing highly secured really about this home besides a wall. I mean, a wall and some cameras.
Really? I mean, it's pretty high tech. She's been living with him for like 3 years, so she knows how to like turn it all off.
Okay. Yeah. She knows how to turn it all off. And this is another thing, like right off the bat, that bothered me. She had all the passwords to the security cameras and like knew all the
Yeah.
passwords and codes to the house. So how
Yeah.
controlling was this guy really? Let's be honest. Let's be honest.
You're wrong here. You're absolutely wrong here.
Okay.
Just because she had like they've been together for 3 years, yeah, she has to be able to like move around the fucking house. It's psychological controlling, not just physical controlling.
Right. Well, I mean, yes, but later on, she does say that, like,
he hit her, yeah.
well, no. I was going to say, no, I wasn't going to go that route. I was going to say he was studying her, right? She would sit there planning her escape, and he was sitting there studying her, right? So, like, I kind of just refused to believe right off the bat that, like, she got away that easily. And then especially, like, when she
didn't get away that easily, did she?
Oh my God. I'm just going to tear the beginning of this movie apart. I really am.
And I'm just going to tell you how wrong you are.
Oh, that's fine. But like right away in the beginning, they're laying in bed. It's like 3 something in the morning, probably
3:41 to 3:42.
Right. And
because you always, anytime you see a clock, you always have to see it progress 1 minute in like every movie ever. It's like an unwritten rule of Hollywood.
Was that this movie too? I'm guessing the clocks weren't lined up like some of the other movies we've reviewed.
No. It starts out at 3:41 and then you see it flip to 3:42 because that's the rule.
And then she's like, okay, got to get out of bed. And of course, his arm's over her. So, that's a big deal. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is all believable. And then, like she gets out of bed, goes over to the nightstand where there was a glass of water, right? And she shakes the glass of water around and you see the powdery liquid. Now, this could just be me. I might just be super anal about this, but like when I'm sitting and drinking a glass of water, like I'm almost always kind of looking at the water. So if I saw powdered shit,
yeah, that's just you.
In my glass of water, I would
literally from the start of this episode, I've taken a drink out of my glass without even a second look at it.
It just his character, the way his character was set up, controlling right from the get-go, millionaire, whatever, however much money he makes. It just, these little details, it just bothered me.
But I think it's because you're not connecting he knew these things. He told her as it's discovered later, like he tells her later, like she was never going to get away from him. Like these are all revelations that come later. So I think like, yeah, you're right in keying in on them, but I think you're not giving enough credit to the character. Like I think that's all part of it.
See, in my mind, I feel like you're giving him a little too much credit. But,
yes, the dude who invents an optic suit to make himself invisible, stages his own death. Yeah, you're right. I'm giving him way too much credit. He's clearly a dumbass.
Yes, he definitely is. The next point, though, finally so she does that. We see that happen in the scene, right? She dumps the water out, goes and gets her bug out bag, and then crosses the kitchen where the dog bowl's in the middle of the floor or whatever. I'll let that one go. She kicks it across the floor. But then she proceeds to like change into her, sweatpants and whatever, like in the kitchen in the other room. And like I know that's building suspense, but like
it's also like where the fuck else is she gonna change?
In the whole point of change where she leaves. The whole point of
changing is to get their clothes on before you got to go out into nature. And clearly she didn't want to like hang out in the garage because of what ends up immediately biting her in the ass because she has to go back for the dog.
Right, because she gets the dog, and then, the dog slightly bumps into the Audi. And I don't own an Audi, so I don't know if this is true, but I refuse to believe that the slightest bump of the car makes the alarm. I don't think
it was a slight bump. It shows this is a big dog, and he full-on backs into it.
It was a soft thud.
No.
What I should have done is I should have gotten a clip of me like banging on my car to see.
Yeah, but your car is not an Audi.
No, my car is not. My car is a Honda CRV.
If we're going to test this, out of the two of us, the ones that are closer, let's go bump into my car.
No, I think we're gonna have to go to a dealership to settle this argument and
That's
be like, yeah,
fine.
let
Let's
me
go.
just lock. Can you please lock this? I want to bump into it.
I want to back my dog into it.
No, my dog wouldn't do a goddamn thing. All 9 pounds of
So
it.
we gotta go to the Humane Society. We gotta borrow a dog, and we gotta go to an Audi dealership.
Yes, yes,
We're gonna be like, hey, can I take this Doberman and back him into that car?
right. Yeah. So that happens. The alarm goes off. Then she's panicked, frantic, right? Because then the lights are going off in the bedroom because he obviously is up now.
Yeah.
Then she goes, scales the wall, runs to the woods, and then she's waiting on the road for her sister to come.
For her piece of shit sister.
For her piece of shit sister to come. Because she wasn't there on time, God forbid.
Her sister's a piece of shit for more reasons than that. But also, like, yeah, if you're supposed to be there if your sister calls you, Dustin, and goes, hey, I need you to pick me up from my boyfriend's house at 4 a.m, you're probably going to be there at 3:30 in the morning to make sure. Like, what the fuck is going on? Her sister rolls up like it's a casual Sunday.
I'd be there.
It's like, oh, hey, Cece, how's it going, girl?
You're clearly
What's
out in the
going
middle of the
on?
road with a flashlight that you're waving the fuck around because you
And a
don't care if
bag,
anyone
and
sees you.
you're clearly not distressed. Like,
And that's just another thing that was bothering me because she's like waving. She's obviously looking back. I get that. Looking back is fine.
she's panicked, man.
Beam of light.
She's freaking out. People do dumb shit when they're freaked out.
Maybe. So anyway, her sister saves her. They drive off into the night. But before that happens, we got Adrian coming up and pounding on the glass, and then bam, hand through the windshield, or arm through the side window, not windshield. My bad. Gotta get that shit right? And then they're off. And then somehow magically she dropped the diazepam pills.
Yeah, that's bullshit. That's definitely bullshit.
Thank you. Finally, something we agree on.
Yeah, no, that's stupid.
So leading up to all of that, I was like, okay. The first 30 seconds were okay for me, but then like when she was, anyway, we'll move on.
You're wrong.
Wrong. It was all planned. The pills were planned too. He knew she was a klutz and was going to drop the pills.
He swapped out her birth control.
Okay, well now you're jumping ahead.
So like, why not? Well, yeah, but we'll come back to it. So like, why is it so unbelievable that he would swap out the diazepam or something, right? Like,
no, I think that was totally on, like, in character later on. Like, I totally agree. Interesting that you bring that up, because as you go through the movie, okay, so we're going to come back to you bringing up that he swaps out the diazepam, because that's an interesting point. Oh, wait. Okay, that was before. Okay, so after, they escape, she ends up staying at her friend's, the police chief.
James. He's
James.
a cop.
Yeah.
He's a detective.
Yeah, so she ends up staying with him and his daughter, Sydney, played by Storm Reed. No idea who she is, but she did a good job. Good job.
No, she's not. Never mind. No, I have no idea who she is. She did good in this movie, though.
Yeah, no, like, I honestly, like...
Although, I gotta say, they definitely played a little fast and loose, in my opinion, with her mannerisms, as she's supposed to be this girl who's about to go to college, but then there are definitely some times that she acts like she's younger. I don't know. Like, there are certain times where the way they scene her out, it presents like she's supposed to be younger, like maybe 14, 15.
More
but
in
it's
like high school, maybe middle school.
But it's like, this is supposed to be a girl who's about to go to college.
Right.
Like, but she did great.
She could be the quiet, reserved type,
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's staying there. She's traumatized, can't go outside because, she spent, you said 3. I must have said that in the description. 3 years living with a controlling boyfriend. So she's like, I can't go out and get the mail. And,
I think it's more of, she's like, I can't go out because what if he's out there?
Oh, yes, right. Because
like, what the hell? You're trying to insult a movie that you can't even get basic plot details right, Dustin.
Well, I mean, Yeah. There was just, there's just so many things that, like, right away I was kind of skeptical. Like, okay, so he developed an invisible suit, an invisibility suit. Okay, that's fine. I will accept that going into this movie.
I would hope so.
I will accept it. I did have some questions though, like, wait, okay, so if the suit's invisible, then how did he manage to figure out how it doesn't, like the suit doesn't cast a shadow? But I'm not going to go into that. I'm not going to go into the science portion. We're just assuming that it exists. And it was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so she's scared. She can't do anything about her life, or she can't do anything because of her controlling boyfriend. She doesn't want him to find her. Did I get that correct? She's traumatized. Yes, which is fair, 100% fair. Like, you can't really. It's all fair. You can't really expect much from a gal who has been living her life locked up in a really fancy house. Not that I'm saying that I want that.
I'm just going to let you keep digging this hole. Go ahead. Keep going.
And then she finds out that Adrian has inevitably, I guess, killed himself because he couldn't live without her, right? I guess that's the picture that we're painting, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. That was another thing that, for me, I was kind of like, okay, so he killed himself because of that? Or were there other things in his life? Because I just found that kind of hard to believe that he would have killed himself over her leaving him. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
I think you're wrong.
You believe that? Later on in the movie, she asks him, why her?
Mm-hmm.
And, like,
the movie answers that question.
Could have had anyone.
The movie answers that question, though.
How so?
Tom literally tells her the reason it had to be her is because she was the one thing that he couldn't completely control. It's literally the classic trope of, if I tell you not to think about elephants, but I talk about elephants, what's the first thing you think of? Elephants. It's the same with him. He's a total control freak, and she is way too much of an independent spirit, so he needs her because she's the one thing that he's not been able to break her yet.
I feel like that's weak. I feel like
you're weak.
That's fine. You can say that I'm weak. That's fine. I'm just saying.
You're
from a writing standpoint. I feel like that's a weak cop out.
To this movie wanting to not like it, and you are finding all the reasons not to like it.
There was a lot of reasons not to like it within the first 30 seconds for me.
No, you're so wrong.
Okay, we've come up to this point. Up until now, how did you feel about the movie?
I thought it was a very well done movie. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it is a movie that carries a lot of very interesting messages.
Mm-hmm.
It explores some very interesting topics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's overall a very well done suspense thriller movie.
I'm waiting for you to defend your position here, besides just coming up with some. I'm wanting to hear more. Tell me more.
What do you want to know more about? What do you want to know?
Well, you're saying it gets into some topics, and it does.
Yeah.
It explains as well. So what topics?
Well, like, one of the big obvious one is it's clearly addressing the impact of trauma on individuals. Okay. And how you carry that trauma with you. But also, if you want to go down the feminist theory route of this movie,
okay,
it not only it goes about the route of what trauma looks like, but in particular how trauma in women is dealt with, and that in the immediacy of that trauma, everyone is like, yeah, okay, cool, like, we're gonna help you out. But then as things wear on, and we see this with everybody, I'm not going to reserve this just to women, but certainly you can equate it to sexual assault survivors, so on and so forth. As time goes on, everybody else goes, all right, you need to get over yourself now.
Right, like, come on.
And pushes them. And then when there are things that we would deem as hysterics, that's what we chalk it up to, is, oh, she's just being hysterical.
Right.
Instead of actually trying to address and deal with the traumas that exist.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating exploration of that. And the fact that you've got me going on a, like, very real feminist tirade on this, I think speaks for itself. So that's like the first major theme of the movie that it addresses and handles exceptionally well.
I will agree with all of that. Now that you've explained that and talked to me about all of that, I will be honest, I didn't pay any attention to all of that because I had all this other stuff that I was...
You missed the big key message because you were looking for all the reasons not to like the movie.
Well, John, I wasn't in the mood for a message. I was in a mood to either be...
Then that means it's the
thrilled.
Perfect message for you.
Well, okay, so this is the problem I have with that, though. If you had to explain to me that message, how many other people did that just go?
I'm pretty sure a quick Google search will tell you that not many other people missed that message. That's one of the things this movie got praised for.
We'll have to ask some of our friends.
Pretty heavily.
I'm kind of curious.
Very clearly.
Okay. So
and part of like the exploration of trauma too is seeing things that aren't there, or seeing people that aren't there, right? Like,
yeah, no, that's all fair.
So, for example, a really interesting conversation to have. We know, spoiler alert, that gets revealed, and you know going into it already.
We already revealed so many spoilers.
We know that Adrian does not die.
Right.
He does not commit suicide, which I have some serious questions about. Well, who the fuck's the body, and who's the ashes, and like all of that.
Well, we can talk about all that, but
yeah, we'll come to that. But an interesting conversation, right? We know he's alive by the time that Cecilia goes out to get the mail, right? So it like cuts away. It's before we find out he's dead, but we find out like 2 minutes after that. Was the guy that's running at her? We never get a clear image. Was it actually Adrian or not?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Because he keeps himself covered in a black hoodie, and we know later that he's alive at that point.
Right.
And he knows where she's at.
Right. And if you haven't seen the movie, that scene is she's finally worked up enough courage to go out and check the mail. And then we hear thump, 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 thump as somebody runs up behind her. And you were exactly correct. It's just a guy in a hoodie, and he runs right past her.
Right.
I hadn't thought about that. That's an interesting one. That would be, obviously you could go back and rewind and pause the movie, but you probably never do get a clear picture of his face.
No.
I think that was another thing that the movie had going for it though too, because after you find out that he committed suicide, it was like, okay, so he's dead, but yet all these things are happening.
Yeah.
Is it him?
Right.
Or is it not him?
No, that's something the movie really does a good job of like setting up for a little while. I almost feel like it gives it up too soon. Mm-hmm. But for a little while, there is a very real like question of, is it him or is she just crazy?
No.
Like imagining things.
Well, yeah, that was really short-lived though.
It was very short-lived.
It was very short-lived.
Very quickly.
Like that's probably like within the first 15 minutes, because then you get the blanket scene. The blanket scene, right? And then was the scene where she was out on the porch? Was that before that one or not?
Comes right after that. The blanket scene is the first like, oh shit, something's up. Mm-hmm. Like clear cut, like there's an invisible man. But again, how long can you trudge it out whenever you're making a film?
Well, and that scene also was bothering me because I was like, man, how heavy of a sleeper are you? Because that was also a blanket scene, rips the blanket off.
Slowly pulls the blanket off.
Oh, yeah, right. And then takes pictures of both of them in bed because she's sleeping with Sydney.
Yes.
Cecilia's. They're sleeping together in the same bed because trauma. Well, and then, she might not have had her own room, I suppose. Maybe. I don't know.
It was like, it didn't look like a very big house. So.
Yeah, no, it was a tiny house. Actually, speaking of that, though, they were renovating the home, and then you had the scene where she just found out that she got the money, and then she was giving them a gift, and it was the ladder. I was like, okay. Mm-hmm. I just felt like that scene. I don't know if it was the acting. I don't know. It just felt really cheesy and corny to me, and I just wanted it to be over. To be 100% honest, like I just felt like it dragged on. And then he was like, "Oh yeah, what is this? A ladder? What is that on the top of the shelf?" And I'm like, "Who wrote this?" Is what I was actually thinking. That I was like, "This is just so."
It was
Yeah.
not like it was supposed to be a stupid. You're telling me your family's never done a stupid, corny thing when they give you a gift?
No, nothing like
Well, then you missed out.
that.
So
I probably did. The most corny thing I can say is wrapping the gift in multiple things of wrapping paper. There was no like, oh, what's that up there?
whatever.
It's not Easter. But yeah, the movie definitely does give up the returning back to our previous conversation. It gives up the air of, oh, like is it just in our head, or is there actually somebody?
Yeah.
Very fast. Well, I mean, that kind of, now that I'm thinking about it, that does make sense though, because it is called the Invisible Man. So, I mean, you couldn't really hold that for very long anyway, I suppose.
Plus, I mean, it told you in the opening scene that there's an invisibility suit. Like,
Yeah.
you see
well,
it.
And that was another thing that bothered me. I was like, why the fuck are we already seeing it? Like, it.
Because, again,
Just
you're watching this as somebody, though, who, A, doesn't watch horror because you have way too high of expectations for it.
Well, it's just...
That's one of the reasons I love the horror genre. But, B... You're also like watching this as somebody who I'm going to assume you've never seen the Invisible Man movies before, any of the other ones. I'm going to assume you've never read the books. Like, the Invisible Man is one of the most long-standing, like, he's up there with Dracula and the Mummy and Frankenstein. So the reason it just gives up the goat on a lot of this shit is because none of it's fucking new, and they knew that. They went, everybody knows these fucking stories, so let's just go. Let's just make our movie.
That's true, and I'll give it that. But I don't know. For me, it was just hard to give up those small things. But where I was going, I was wanting to bring back the diazepam connection, because throughout the movie, it's kind of like trying to get you to. Well, I would argue that it was trying to kind of keep you on edge of like, well, is it actually him in the suit, or is it someone else? And I guess he could have planned this too before he committed suicide and left a detailed note. But like, he was the one that left, or that was left on the sink, right? During the day after she took a shower, he left the pill bottle.
Yeah, probably.
Right. And I thought that was a little odd, but yeah, I don't know. And that kind of makes me think that it was him in the suit. And then I kind of
probably
just gets rid of all of that fantasy that I kind of had in my head. Well, maybe it wasn't actually him the entire movie. Maybe it was
I don't think it was him the entire movie.
Well, it wasn't. It wasn't obviously him the entire movie, but now I'm thinking it was him the majority of the movie.
Well, probably. We've established he's a control freak. Do you think he's going to let his master plan just kind of ride the waves while he's like
locked in his basement?
Yeah, like no, absolutely not.
Probably not. And I am probably being a little overly critical.
You are absolutely. You know what this tells me though?
It's funny though because, well, pause real quick.
Yeah.
You wanted me to film my reaction to this, and I honest to God was laughing at it more than anything.
Well, that's great. You know what that means? You know what that means, Dustin?
What?
That means we did not fulfill our obligation to watch a horror movie, and we get to do a real horror movie.
I mean, I think we need to watch something else, but
awesome. We will then.
Not something too hardcore, because I don't fuck with some stuff, man.
Here's my problem, Dustin. You're gonna continue to think of all these things as hardcore, but I'm telling you, if you watch, there's some horror movies that yes, if I threw you into them,
I'm thinking The Conjuring, right?
You're gonna be a little freaked out. Yeah. But there's enough horror out there that is true classic horror. That you know what most people do? They fucking laugh at it because that's horror. Especially like classic horror or horror based off of classics,
like Scream.
Love Scream, great franchise.
Yeah, I know that's one of your favorites.
All-time favorite movie.
And that I'll say Scream kind of kept me on the edge of my seat more so than this.
Yeah. Also, you didn't know much about the premise going into it.
This is true. But
so, we're going to watch a real horror movie. We'll discuss which one. We're going to watch a real horror movie for the actual Halloween episode.
Yes.
we're still gonna watch the Netflix Halloween Hubby Adam Sandler
Yep.
movie, and then we will have a real horror. We'll discuss which one later, and we'll hash it out after this episode. Um, anyway, circling back to the movie at hand, The Invisible Man.
The Invisible Man.
I know
Or
one
woman.
thing you wanted
It
to
could have been
talk
a woman in the
about.
suit.
It could have been. I know one thing you want to talk about is the handprint.
Ah, yes, because afterwards, I was looking at the cover art and I saw the handprint
Oh,
on the shower. And I was thinking to myself when I watched the trailer and then before the movie, well, I can't wait to see that scene. And then I realized this scene in the shower when she was taking a shower and then doing whatever, that never happened. And then I brought it up to you afterwards, and you were like, "Oh my gosh, we'd save it for the podcast." Yeah.
yes.
So or the show.
Yeah. No. The only story behind that, it's gonna be a huge letdown for you.
Oh.
Is despite being heavily featured in
Marketing,
all of the
probably.
promotional work, everything, the director pretty early on decided to cut it because he thought it would be kind of creepier or more intense for her to just see the pill bottle,
I disagree with that.
than to
But
have the handprint suddenly show up, especially because he had already done the breath thing outside. So yeah, that was his position. That's why the handprint's not there. But the studio went, well, it looks cool, so we're gonna keep it in all the promotional stuff.
that's kind of sad. I'm thinking about that would have just been another element that would have really kind of tied into the obsession factor.
Yeah.
Like handprint, like
Right.
Yeah,
no, definitely.
especially when she wasn't looking. That could have been cool.
It could have been, man. Could have been.
I'll never see it. The Snyder Cut, The Invisible Man.
Doesn't exist. I hate to say it. All right. What did you want to talk about next? If you don't have anything,
there's
I've got
much.
some stuff.
There's so much. I want to let you talk a little bit because we have very
dramatically different opinions.
So yes, please.
First, I'm gonna dive us into something about the director first. So we've kind of briefly touched on him. Director Leigh Whanell.
Mm-hmm.
Love Leigh Whanell. He's one of my favorite people.
Okay. He's directed a lot of other movies I saw.
He has, including Saw.
Yep.
So Leigh Whanell and James Wan are two of my favorite horror directors. James Wan behind The Conjuring and Insidious and Aquaman.
Okay, yep. Yeah, I saw that when I was scrolling through.
So Leigh Whanell and James Wan are old friends. They came up with the Saw movie together, the concept for Saw. So Leigh Whanell is like just one of my favorite people. You know me, I love the Saw franchise, and I'm one of the weird people, we do exist, that I genuinely love the franchise because of the convoluted as hell story, and not just watching creative ways for people to die. Fun fact about Leigh Whanell and James Wan, though, they actually made there's a short film called Saw. That is a short film, 9-minute film that Leigh Whanell and James Wan made when they were going to make the pitch for the movie itself. That they also made on a shoestring budget. One of my reasons that I love Leigh Whanell is this is a guy that he really is like, he's a director and a writer and a producer and an actor, but he is seriously a fan of movies and of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And one of my all-time favorite stories about Leigh Whanell, when they made the short film for Saw called Saw, the 9-minute clip eventually actually got remade and redone into the Saw movie, the first movie.
Okay. Yep.
With different actors and stuff like that. But they were doing it on such a shoestring budget that one of the most famous traps from the Saw franchise is the reverse bear trap. they didn't have enough money to do special effects, and that's the scene that they did the 9-minute film on. So Leigh Whanell legitimately, like, they went out, they got a bear trap, they cut it so that it was safe, but then they built it into this thing, and he literally wore this fucking bear trap, rusty ass metal, in his mouth and on his face so that they could do this 9-minute clip, because he was like, we have to make this look good, otherwise they won't pick up the movie. So, like, this is a guy that he's a true fan of what he does, and I
Gotta
can
do what you gotta do.
I love that.
Bootstrap it.
But yeah, so no, Leigh Whanell, James Wan,
Bear
two of my
trap
favorite folks. So he did this movie. He didn't even know this is the movie he was coming in to do. Like, he got a call that Blumhouse wanted to talk to him. And then he went in and was like, they just started talking. It was one of those weird situations where, like, I guess the production company just didn't communicate with their people to communicate to his people, because he walks in and he's recounted how it went. He's like, yeah, I walk in and I sit down and they just start talking to me about the movie, and I'm sitting there like, what fucking movie are you guys, like, what are you pitching me on?
Guys, I don't have the notes. I haven't read the notes. So you're telling me right now.
And so he's sitting there like, what? And then finally they're like, oh, by the way, it's the Invisible Man. And he was like, oh, okay. Another fun fact about this movie. So this is actually the second reboot of Universal's classic horrors in the past, like, 10 years.
Okay. It's a part of that.
Because it was supposed to be a part of the dark universe that Universal was setting up with The Mummy starring Tom Cruise. It was supposed to star Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, but all that fell apart because The Mummy was a terrible movie.
See, you just described something that sounds inevitably more interesting to me.
Absolutely not. No. So that was a total fall apart.
So did they reboot it after that?
This was the second reboot attempt.
Okay.
Because the original reboot attempt of the classic Universal horror icons was 2014's Dracula Untold. And that movie didn't do well. So then they were like, all right, let's do it again. And they did The Mummy. And then that movie didn't do well. And so then they were like, fuck it, let's just make something. And so that's how we ended up with this movie as a dramatically different departure from because one of the things that Universal was trying to do when they were rebooting their classic horror icons is they were trying to, and this movie does it in a certain way too, but they were trying to, like, heavily modernize these characters. But at the expense of, like, actual storytelling. Like, they were just like, how do we make these characters cool?
Okay.
And so they were just trying to make them cool. Whereas this movie, it modernizes the Invisible Man, but in the sense of trying to make it make sense a little bit more than just, oh, a guy drank a potion that turned him invisible.
Yep.
And so, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you say that about the story, and I kind of was asking myself, what would it have been like if we would have had a little bit more background on Adrian, and, like, him maybe making the suit, or maybe they wanted to just jump into it, because they really did just jump into it.
Yeah,
but, like, no, I didn't feel like we had much of a background on.
Well, part of that too, you have to know things. Like, number one, Leigh Whanell, like I said, one of my favorite people. Look at the movies the man's made. Leigh Whanell makes movies that are not they don't have the biggest budget. And the other thing is, you have to know something about Blumhouse, which is the production company. Blumhouse makes small budget horror. Like, that's what they do. They don't make multi-quadrillion-dollar budget movies.
Well, I mean, I'm not asking for much. I'm just asking for, like, 10 minutes of backstory.
So you're telling me you wanted another 10 minutes on this film? No, exactly.
If they would have cut some of the other stuff that I thought was kind of, I mean, the movie takes place in San Francisco, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, oh, right. Yeah, because the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
How cold does it get in San Francisco
It
at
can
night?
get cold.
Right. It can get cold. Does it get cold enough to actually see your breath though? Because I was wondering about that
I
in that scene.
mean, a quick Google search here tells us it gets down to the 50s.
Yeah, I live in Iowa. That's a no. I mean, I'm not saying that it's never gotten that cold, and I'm not making fun of anybody that lives in San Francisco.
Right.
But
No,
I saw
I'll
that,
agree with that.
and I
I'll
was
agree with
like,
that.
"What?" Like, I know that was like an intense thing, but for me, it was just another
No,
disconnect.
I'll agree with that. That was like, oh wait,
Uh,
they actually
but
filmed the movie though in a different country. So
well, okay. So you were saying about low budget. I will say the cinematography and like what they did with all the camera angles and stuff and the lighting, that was
was
all spot on.
awesome.
That was all spot on. The
One of
one
the
gripe
things
I
it
had though was the
oh go
intro
ahead.
credits.
What? You didn't
I
like the
kind of wanted that
credits?
water to fall down a little slower so I could actually read the words.
Okay. Well, you're
But
just a slow reader. That's not their fault.
this is true. I am a slow
It's not their fault. You can't read 3 words
Hey,
in the
there
amount
was
of time
more
they
credits
gave you.
before that. There was more credits before that, and I thought there were just waves happening. I wasn't even prepared because I was just waiting. Yeah.
So subverted your expectations.
Well, I was
That's
trying to set
fine.
up my camera and all that. Anyway.
Um, one of the things I love, like that's one of the things this movie gets really praised for is its cinematography
Mm-hmm.
because it's
Biggest
very
fan.
like it intentionally. It's almost filmed in a similar fashion, and you wouldn't be able to relate to this to Paranormal Activity, right? Like it is almost filmed in a found footage kind of paranormal movie style,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it kind of is playing on those same tropes. It's an intentionally wide shot for no reason. The film is always framed in such a way that there's space for an additional person.
Yep.
Usually an additional person right next to Cecilia. Always leaves that little bit of dead space there so that you're like, is he there or is he not?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then it does there's been a lot of like internet chatter. The director Leigh Whanell confirmed, at least from what I was reading. Um, there was a lot of speculation as to like, were we seeing the POV of the Invisible Man, or were we seing over his
Mm-hmm.
shoulder? Um, it does a lot of like leading and following him. So, for example, in the
Mm-hmm.
scene, right after she finds out he's dead, and she's like hanging up her dress, and then the camera pans to nothing and stops, and then she walks in the scene. What that was it was following the Invisible Man to where he went, and then she comes in. Um, so you always get kind of the over the shoulder look for him whenever it goes off of kind of his perspective. But one of the things that it did really well too, and it's a really subtle detail, is there's a lot of times where it's clearly leading you to believe that he's following her, but it confirms that that's not always the case if you pay attention. Now this probably went over people's heads, some people's heads. It's fine. But the scene that really locks in that that's not always the case is we get that kind of he's following her camera view when she's walking through the house, but then behind her, way away from her, from anywhere the camera would be, the front door opens. So he
Yeah.
did that filming to make you uneasy about like, okay, well, when is he there? When isn't he there? Is there a way to really know?
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and Leigh Whanell, the only one who knows is Leigh Whanell because he did all like he picked the days that he was going to have the Invisible Man on set and all that kind of framing. And he's even gone on record to say like, no, some of it was intentionally filmed to make you think he's there, but he's not supposed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So that cinematography and framing was awesome. The other thing it does really well, and again, I don't know if you picked up on it, is in almost in the vast majority of scenes, there's a silhouette in the background, almost always. In one scene, it's the coats hanging on the coat hook.
Mhm.
And the scene, the obvious scene in the bedroom, it's the mannequin. And like there's a bunch of scenes where there's always some kind of silhouetted figure in the background. To kind of catch in your peripheral and be like, wait, okay, no, that's just a coat.
Yep.
So
I didn't pick up on that as much, and actually, it's funny that you mentioned the coat rack in the bedroom, because I was like, who the fuck has a coat rack in the
it's a
bedroom?
mannequin. It's a mannequin, and she's going to be a design student, a
Designer.
fashion
Yeah,
student.
I was gonna say all that. I broke all that down pretty quickly,
Okay,
but
okay.
at first I was like, why the fuck is that in there? Real though.
Oh man.
Well, I need another drink, so I think this is a perfect place to take a break.
Yeah.
We'll
Let's
come
take a
back.
quick break. Absolutely.
Rum'd. Up. Reviews.
And we're back.
Hey.
Hey, hey, hey. What are you, actually, John, what are you drinking tonight?
What am I drinking tonight?
Yeah.
I brought my drink with me tonight. I'm drinking Kirk and Sweeney 18 year. Like $40 a bottle, Dominican rum. And I'm mixing that with apple juice because rum and apple juice go really well together.
If we have any actual rum drinkers, listen to this.
I'm an actual rum drinker. I'm also just a budgeted actual rum drinker.
Yeah, exactly. I'm talking about the hardcore people who are like, you need to drink this straight. You need to let it breathe for a day.
I mean,
No
I've
ice.
done that before too, but
Well, you know
I,
it. You know what I mean. I'm over here drinking gin and Sprite. Essentially, it's Sprite ginger. It's good. It's good.
Okay,
It's a good
so
substitute for
you wanted
ginger
to
beer.
give me a lot of crap for what I'm drinking, but you're over there drinking. Okay, cool. Anyway,
But a guy can't drink gin on a rum show.
I mean, it's the second time you betrayed the premise. I'm just saying.
Well, we need more rum. Wink, wink. Anybody
Buy
out
more
there?
rum.
Product placement. I'm looking for product placement. No. Anyway.
You're looking for sponsors. Anyway, so this movie.
This movie. I wanted to jump to the scene where she's freaking out because.
Which one?
Yeah, what scene is she not?
You just
freaking
described like 87% of the movie.
Well, leading up to this scene, actually, we should build that out. He's toying with her. The Invisible Man is toying with her. He sabotaged her job interview by stealing the documents.
Yeah.
In her
That's
portfolio.
Okay. That dude was creepy. She didn't want to work there anyway.
He was a little creepy, but I mean, was it the fact that he was creepy or the fact that she was just being really awkward through the interview and he just didn't have a clue how to respond to that?
Nah, he was being sleazy.
Nah. I mean, that's fair.
I've sat through awkward interviews with people. He was being sleazy.
Well, now that you say that, he did have the quote.
Why did you study in France? Is that where all the beautiful women have to go? Yeah,
exactly.
No, and then we both know the value of closet space.
That one went over my head.
Sleazy ass motherfucker.
Anyway, so that happens. What was some other stuff? Keys go missing. A knife goes missing. That all happens kind of earlier on.
Fire happens.
Yeah. But so she's all on edge, questioning whether or not she's seeing things or not seeing things.
I don't think she's questioning it.
Well,
I think she's pretty dead set.
I should have said at first she was questioning things, and then it was like, yeah, no, this shit's happening. And then she's got it in her head. Oh, the email to her sister that she sent at like 5 a.m.
Yeah, further evidence that her sister sucks.
Yes. What? Okay. No.
Her sister sucks.
Oh, okay. Well, explain that a little bit more. I think I know what you're thinking about, but I want you to explain it.
Well, number one, like, come on. In this day and age, the movie is set in 2020. It literally has 2020 in it a couple times. Yeah. So you're telling me that your sibling shows up at your house and you're going to be like, oh, you sent me this pissed off email. And if your sibling's like, dude, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Your response isn't to go, maybe maybe she really didn't send it. Maybe,
Right.
maybe it was a hack. Even if you don't think it was her dead ex-boyfriend, you're telling me you're not going to go, well, maybe she didn't send that email.
Yeah. And not to go down like the whole conspiracy thing, but everyone watching you, everything being able to be hacked, you think she would have had some premise or some shred of doubt in her mind that, maybe you didn't just completely tear me apart in this email and send it to me at 5 a.m. Yeah. But
her sister sucks.
yeah. Well, and leading up to her confronting her, having a complete breakdown, having to meet her in a public place, the restaurant, to talk about what she knows now, right? And as she's like explaining, like, oh, he's got the suit, lets him be invisible. She's freaking out, and then all of a sudden we get the floating knife in the middle of the restaurant, and the shitty sister getting her slit throat. Jeez, try to say that 5 times fast. Shitty sister getting her
shitty sister getting throat slit.
Yeah. That was another moment where I just burst out laughing because it was just so unexpected for me in the middle of the restaurant.
Yeah. That's the brilliance of the scene, though. It gets undercut by the ridiculousness of how it happens. But the brilliance of that scene is that it's set in a public, well-lit place in a horror movie. Nothing bad. That's always the safe havens in a horror movie, right? A public, well-lit, like, oh, it can't go wrong, and then it does.
I will give you that.
It would have been way more effective if it wasn't kind of an absurd way that it happens.
I agree. Now that you explain like the classic trope, right, from horror movies, like, it could have been way more effective if it was done better. Like, I understand why it was in the middle of the restaurant, obviously, because that is the safest spot. But like, did the person go around and make sure the cameras were off? And then like there were so many people in the restaurant, right?
Yeah, that's a big thing you have to ignore in this movie is that, like, especially for a movie that starts out pretty hot and heavy with the camera work, the cameras being in the house, I guess cameras don't exist anywhere else in San Francisco.
Right. Well, and not even that, but like right after that happens, the knife just magically gets like tossed into her hand.
Yeah. He grabbed her hand and shoved the knife into her hand.
I know, but like at that point, are you really actually grabbing it?
I mean, if you get something punched, like, would she have held on to it? Probably not, but she was also in a state of shock. But put your hand like this and let me punch something into it. You're going to naturally close.
I would make the argument, though, that in the state of shock, she would have, like, fucking flinched back.
Probably.
But I digress. That was another point, though, for me that was like, what the hell? Also, this is actually going backwards. The scene in the attic. I understand why it happened and that it was really suspensive. I loved everything about that. Her having to go up the ladder that she bought for the family.
Mm-hmm. Although, what an absurd concept. Like, attics always have the pull down. So, like, what the hell?
Well, I mean,
I've not seen an attic that doesn't have some kind of a pull down ladder into it.
Oh, really? Like my attics in my parents' houses were like that. So
really?
Yeah.
Interesting. I've never seen that.
Little trap door, pretty much exactly like that. A little hole in the ceiling that has like some trim. You can barely tell it's there. Looks like a body's hidden up there.
I mean, that's the way the attic crawl space in my house is, except you pull it down with a little string, and then there's a ladder that comes out.
Right. Yeah, which is fair. So like, there's that. But like, her freaking out in the bedroom and then calling him.
Yeah.
And then it ringing.
The phone.
The music to that was really well done. And then the suspense around that, and she goes up and she finds everything along with his phone. Surprise.
Yeah. So I got to cut in here real quick. One of the things I love about that scene, though, and you wouldn't know this if you didn't know to look for it, and I knew to look for it, so this is why I knew. I love it. That was originally a longer scene. Mm-hmm. She was gonna find more stuff. Most notably, she was gonna find a pile of her clothes, primarily comprising of her underwear, up there that he had been hoarding. They ultimately decided to cut the scene down, but if you look closely when the camera cuts to kind of the wide view of her up there, you can actually see the pile of her clothes off to the right.
Mm-hmm. See,
And I almost like that it's more subtle that way, because that's just a much more subtle, like, yeah, this dude's disturbed.
yeah, well, but again, to I, I think that would have helped emphasize the fact, like that he was really obsessed with her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because without that,
Here's the thing, though. You're viewing this as his story. It's not his story.
I'm
It's her
not viewing
story.
it as his story
It's her
per se.
story.
I'm just,
Yes, you are.
I just felt like the character development for him was kind of weak, and I
That's
wasn't.
because it's low
They,
budget. B, it had a lengthy runtime already, so it gave you the fucking highlights and then moved on. And it's her story, not his story.
okay, that's fine, but like I just didn't feel like there was enough of a connection for me to like say, okay, yeah, this guy was obsessed. Like there wasn't enough.
I think part of that was also intentional, because you're still supposed to be questioning, A, is it real? And
I
then
knew you were
B,
going to
is
make
it
that argument.
him?
Yeah, I knew you were going to make that argument. But right after that, immediately after that, we hear, I don't know, she hears something, so then she has to go and like poke over, the attic window to look down, right? And that's where she had picked up the knife that was up there, that was stolen from earlier on, and she has that knife in her hand
Mm-hmm.
as she was looking into the abyss.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm different, but if I would have thought something was there, but I didn't see anything, and I thought it was my crazy boyfriend or lover or whatever, I probably would have stabbed with the knife and not grabbed the paint can and dumped it on him. Second point, though, why the fuck was there a can of paint up in the attic with the lid off? Just sitting up there.
Was the lid off?
Yeah. Well,
I
how
think
else was
the
the
lid
paint
was
supposed to
off.
just spill out?
I think the lid was loose. I don't think the lid was
Okay,
off.
if the lid...
And you're gonna make the argument, if the lid was loose, the paint would have dried out. And also,
it was perfect. It was too perfect. That was the problem.
that's
It
fine.
was just
That's
too many
fine.
too perfect things.
And also, though, like, yeah, I would agree with, like, probably give the old stabby stab a try there. But also, if you're building a premise of, like, if your psyche has been battling of, is this dude actually invisible? Like, yeah, I might try to be like, I'm gonna dump something on him to make his ass seeable.
I just go for it. But again, that might just be me. I'm crazy, maybe.
I don't know, man.
Bum, bum, bum.
All right, what else you got? What else you want to complain about, so I can tell you you're wrong?
What else do I want to complain about? I wish there was more scenes like later on when she inevitably gets admitted to the psych ward. I wish there was a little bit more in the rain of like you seeing him like silhouetted in the rain, because that would have been a for sure thing, and I didn't really feel like they played. And to what you were saying earlier, it was a lower budget film, so that would have required more special effects. So I can understand them not wanting to do that.
I think it's also like, that is such a this movie also, like, if you know the tropes of horror, this movie, and Leigh Whanell does this a lot. Like, he was poking fun at the tropes of horror. And so that's another thing, though, that is like so played out in particular with the Invisible Man movies, all of them, Hollow Man, everything, right? Is like, the obvious answer was like, oh, we'll just get them in the rain or get them in the water. You can see it.
Right.
And so I think it was like, A, they didn't want to spend the extra money on the special effects, and B, they were like, fuck it, everybody's seen that already 100 times.
That's all fair. That's all fair. But, him breaking out of the psych ward, and then beating up all the cops, I thought that was a little like, they would have been shooting at him. They would have been just shooting. Guns would have been ablazing.
Probably.
But after that, though, like, I really don't have much to gripe on the movie. I like the brother acting. Who was that played by? Adrian's brother.
Tom was played by
Michael Dorman.
Yes.
I haven't seen him in anything else. Have you?
I think I've seen him in like one other thing, but I could not tell you.
Oh my gosh. Well, he apparently was in Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales.
There we go.
First Officer Wade.
There we go. God, what else? Maybe that's what I was thinking of. Like, he's another one of those guys that I feel like you see him and you're like, he looks kind of familiar,
right?
But I can't place it. and that's very much me with him. Is like, yeah, he looks vaguely familiar, but I couldn't tell you from where.
Right.
Um,
But yeah, no,
so
like I thought his acting was spot on, you know, in the scenes, the little scenes that he did have, you know, with
mhm,
negotiating
the will.
the will. Thank you. I thought he did really
Yeah,
well.
one of the things with him, and I didn't really pick up on this until like after when I was doing some research on the film independently. And I can kind of see it. I don't think they exhibited it quite as well as they could have. So he's very much like built as a character to feel like he doesn't fit with everything else that's going on. Um, like he's supposed to feel like he's kind of an odd fit in with the rest of the characters and the rest of the story that's going on and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, so much so that they actually, and again, it's something so subtle that like sometimes this was an instance of I think them trying to be smarter than than the movie was.
Yep.
Um, all of his suits are actually one size too small to really like subtly try to emphasize how like he doesn't quite fit in correctly. And I was like, if you know to look for it, yeah, you can notice the suits are a little tight, but also like it's not an uncommon thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you make that point because I would, I didn't have that. I didn't feel
yeah,
like that was portrayed, you know,
no, I didn't at
in the
first
movie.
either.
Uh, I
I
felt
really
like,
didn't even knowing that that was like an idea that they had. I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of see like he's a little bit of unique compared to everyone else, but nothing like outstanding.
yeah,
Nothing that makes you go, oh, that dude does not belong in this movie.
I feel like if they
Um,
were gonna go that route, they should have put him in like more plain clothes, you know, like,
something, right?
and
Like
then like,
something.
well, and then even like the office that he was in, like he felt important, like from the setting of his office to the boardroom, you know,
Yeah,
the huge boardroom table that they signed the contract on or
yeah.
the will
No,
on,
absolutely,
to his
absolutely.
fancy fucking briefcase with pens.
Gold pins.
Yeah, gold pens. Oh man, I'm totally forgetting what kind of pens those are now.
I have no idea. Oh,
The pointy
they're
ones.
pointy ones. They are
I remembered it. I want to know if you can remember it.
I can't. I just want to say calligraphy pens, but that's not right.
Fountain
Fountain
quill tip
pens.
pens. Yep.
Fountain pens. That's it.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah. No, he felt very important. So that's interesting that they were
yeah.
going for that kind of vibe.
No, absolutely. Um, yeah, I mean, there are definitely some plot holes in this movie. It is not a perfect movie.
Some.
It is very much a thriller and suspense movie. It is not a horror movie. I told you that going into it.
Hmm.
Um, since you've admitted that you agree to that, we're gonna do a real horror movie. Um,
It's funny that you say that again, though, because I do feel like it does play on a lot of the classic horror tropes.
right.
And you were saying that. So now I got to ask: are there classic thriller tropes too that I'm not aware of?
Thriller is a subgenre of horror.
Horror, of course,
Yeah.
of course.
Which then thriller kind of started becoming. There's action thrillers and suspense thrillers and psychological thrillers and yada 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 yada.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
subgenres into further subgenres. So I mean, yeah, there are, but it's again they're tied into the horror
Yep.
genre as a whole. Um, yeah, just a couple of like fun fact things about the movie.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of a cheeky little thing that they did. Cecilia,
Mm,
the main
I
character,
know where you're going.
yeah, derived from the Latin word. I think it's caesius,
Oh,
which means blind.
I don't know Latin. Yep.
Um, so like, okay, haha, funny. Um,
My reaction when I saw that.
right. The number code, just a nice little like nod to classic horror fans. The number code to get into Adrian's house is 1933. which is the release date of the original The Invisible Man movie.
Oh, okay. I can appreciate
So,
that. I can
yeah, so that
appreciate
was a
that.
nice little like wink and nod. I talked about this briefly earlier, but Leigh Whanell, guy who invented Saw, you get a super obvious Easter egg. You might not have known like what it was, but you saw it. You get a super obvious Easter egg to Billy the Puppet, the main puppet from the Saw franchise that Jigsaw uses. It's the white face with the red swirls on his cheek.
Right.
You get that when Cecilia's escaping. The
Where?
when she hops in the car that she steals after escaping the um, mental health
From
facility,
the psych
she
ward.
she turns the car, and on the wall there's a bunch of graffiti, including a giant Billy the Puppet
Really?
head.
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
so anybody that's a fan of the Saw franchise, like immediately is like, "Hey, that was it, cool." Um,
Oh, gosh, you just brought real quick though. You just brought out another hole that I had in the movie.
yeah,
How the fuck did he get so far ahead of her?
who?
The Invisible Man, because she escaped the psych ward. She was chasing him, right? He gets in his car, drives off. And then in turn causes a wreck. So then she steals that car that got wrecked, and then she was like right behind him. She was tailing him, and then all of a sudden he beats her by like a considerable margin. To
There's a pretty obvious answer, Dustin.
what? He drives faster.
No, Adrian wasn't at the house. Tom was.
Okay. Okay.
Adrian went home.
So that
Tom was
so when you
waiting at
think
the
they
house,
made the switch.
and
Yep.
when Adrian hops in the car to disappear, and she's chasing, because she's also not right after
Wow.
him.
That was really
He
elaborate
calls
then.
Tom and is like, "Go fucking kill this little girl," and Tom sneaks in. There's also a fantastic Easter egg telling you. Again, nobody's gonna pick up on this, but there's a fantastic Easter egg telling you it's Tom and not Adrian. Earlier in the movie, Cecilia looks at Tom and she calls him. She always thought he was a victim of of his brother, just like she was. Then she
Mm-hmm.
realized he's just a jellyfish version of Adrian.
Uh-huh.
The shirt that Sydney's wearing is a jellyfish shirt.
Oh my God.
It's a
Really?
throwback. It's a throwback to that. Like it's supposed to be a subtle signal of like this isn't Adrian.
That's hilarious.
Um. So
Man,
yeah.
I will say that when he got shot, I was like in my head wondering if the suit was bulletproof because he staggered on for a little bit too
He
long.
staggered for a minute, man.
I was like, man, if
Um,
this suit's bulletproof, I'm just done. I am so done.
yeah, no, he definitely, yeah, that he definitely took those shots like a champ.
Yeah, he did. Right to the chest. Like 4 shots. Good
Right.
shot. She's a good shot, probably for
She
never really
is.
firing a gun. Yeah, I mean, there wasn't much range.
Who
But,
said she didn't really? Who said she's never really fired a gun before? We
well,
don't
I
know that.
mean,
You're making assumptions about the character that are based
playing
entirely on
into the
nothing.
typical character. Well, yeah, and there was no background on her shooting range experience. I would
Yeah,
say
so you
that she
can't
was
make the
traumatic
assumption
and
that she has
probably,
no
well, she
experience
wasn't
either.
practicing shooting at a gun range for the past 3 years, unless
I
that was
mean,
all
you don't know
planned.
that. There's a lot of property out there. Maybe she was
Oh
out
gosh.
there shooting skeet.
Okay. Okay. I yield. I will say though, I hadn't thought about that up until that point. That's the obvious answer, and they made the switch. So
Yeah.
you would say that Adrian was the one behind 90% of the
I don't
things
know.
happening. Oh, okay.
That I don't know, actually. This movie hits on something that's been a long-standing question for Scream fans as well. When you introduce the concept of two killers, everybody
Oh.
wants to start going, okay, well, which one was where?
Mm-hmm.
And there are ways you can figure it out. But for example, with Scream, if you didn't know this, spoiler for a movie that came out in 1993, um, there's two killers, Billy and Stu. And so then there's a lot of people. There's an avid fan base that has gone back and like dissected. Well, this kill had to have been Stu. This kill had to have been Billy. This kill could be either one of them. And I think
Oh
that
my
that stands
gosh.
in this movie too. Is like, okay, well, which ones are which? Absolutely anything in the um, the mental health facility, the psych ward, was Adrian. Tom was obviously the one to attack Sydney, but
Yeah.
everything else is like I don't know.
Well, it's funny that you say that, yeah, because that would have to be the obvious conclusion because Adrian had a spine.
Yeah.
And
Well, and that's why there's a lot of assumptions if you kind of go through it.
I think you also get a sound clip. He goes bang to one of the security guards.
He does.
So.
But he also says surprise to her when they get in, first take her in there.
Mm-hmm.
And then he talks to her you get a sound clip because he talks to her in the parking lot.
Yep.
He tells her that she's the reason that little girl has to die now.
Oh my gosh.
There's a
so
large
sad
assumption that the way you figure it out is if there's something very malice occurring, violent, then it's Adrian.
Mm-hmm.
Because Adrian clearly presents as the violent aggressor more so than Tom ever does. Even when Tom is being his brother's little sponge, he's still not like violent or aggressive. So there's speculate, like the way you kind of deduce it is, was something very violent or aggressive occurring? Probably Adrian.
He does
Was it something passive? Probably Tom.
Right. I will say he does completely kick James, the police officer's ass.
He does. No, that
but
he does.
He did have the element of
but
surprise.
He was also had the element of surprise, and he was also running off a lot of adrenaline in that moment.
Yeah.
Because he's just been maced.
We'll give you that one. We'll give you that
one. And so there is actually a theory, though, and I don't put much stock in it. There's a theory that both Adrian and Tom are at the house at the end. And then Adrian dips out in a hurry when Cecilia shows up, which he would have got there just before Cecilia.
Right.
And the only real evidence of that theory, and again, I don't put a ton of stock in it, but I figure we should address it, is Sydney maces Tom, presumably, in her bedroom, and then gets up and runs out. We saw Tom react when he got maced, or the Invisible Man, that he falls kind of to the right of the door.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Sydney runs out, the way she gets hit and falls, it doesn't look like she gets her hair pulled or anything. It looks like she ran into somebody's arm, like she got clotheslined. And so there's a theory that Adrian got there, knocked her down, maybe started trying to fight, and then went, I'm getting out of here. I don't buy it. I think it was just they thought that the knockdown of Sydney looked cool, and they were like, we're going to go with that shot.
Right.
And I think it was all Tom at the end.
I would agree with that too, because Adrian's suit was kind of compromised from the.
It was glitching out.
Yeah. So,
absolutely.
And I don't think it glitched once in the house scene.
It did not.
But man, we got into the nitty gritty there.
We did. I'm trying to think. Let me just.
Did you got any other fun facts?
I don't think so. Other than and this one, and I found this one really interesting. Because of a personal connection. This movie made a lot of people realize they have trypophobia.
What is that?
Fear or disgust at tightly packed holes.
What?
Because of the way the suit is designed.
Oh, yeah.
I find that really interesting because, and this just goes to show you that this is all a sliding scale. I actually have trypophobia. I get very easily disgusted at tightly packed holes, but that suit did not do that to me. Did not trigger that for me at all.
Well, okay. Now that we're on that subject, though, I think the iPhone did the same thing for some people.
It did.
Did it do that for you or no?
I don't think the iPhone did. Maybe it's something with technology that I'm just like, nah.
Doesn't bother you.
Yeah, it bothers me if it's something that looks natural or in nature. That's not tech based. So yeah, no, there's been some character designs in the past that really like I cringe at because I don't like it.
Yeah.
There's been things like in nature, like in like the way fungus grows on a tree or something, like it will fucking
creep you out,
gross you the fuck out. It makes me incredibly uncomfortable.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, no, like one of my biggest. Yeah, no, absolutely.
we
So,
won't go down. We won't go down there.
but
So
yeah, so this movie, because of the suit, made a lot of people realize they have
that,
trypophobia. Like I
huh?
said, did not trigger it for me at all.
I will say I found it a little kind of creepy. I don't know if it was creepy is the right word to use there. It was again, it was a little more of like disbelief, like how the hell did he get that many cameras in a suit, and how the hell does that work? But like also
Yeah,
just like the sound effects that they chose to use, I was like, would it really
right.
make those kind of noises? So like,
Absolutely not.
anyway,
Right.
but so I gotta ask, have you seen any of the other like the original Invisible Man movies?
I
Because
have.
I have not.
So
Um,
I've seen the original Invisible Man. I've seen Hollow Man, which is a great movie starring Kevin Bacon.
is that along with similar like lore? Like some
As
guy.
this, no, this movie is very different from the
No. I
Invisible
mean,
Man
just
movie.
like Hollow Man. Does he become like invisible? Is
Yeah,
that
yep,
okay?
yeah.
Okay.
So it follows the same kind of lore of like this guy makes himself invisible and then goes insane
Mm-hmm.
because he can't turn visible again. um,
Okay. Yeah.
and so, which this movie also like subverted one of the common things like with the Invisible Man story has always been, well, if every cell in the body turns invisible, you would be blind, so he would not be able to see. Um, and this movie subverts that by just being like, yeah, I know it's the suit that turns him
HUD.
invisible,
Well,
but
yeah, and
yeah,
then he has a HUD from the
yeah,
cameras that he can see out.
exactly, exactly. So
Okay. Well, and that would explain the scene where like she could see herself from the suit from
yeah,
the on-screen thing.
yeah,
I thought that was kind of weird that they were doing that. I was like, okay, that's cool, but
yeah.
that's a fun fact that you threw in there. I wouldn't have
Yeah,
thought about
yeah.
that.
So, but no, Hollow Man, very good movie. I actually, it's really funny. Several weeks ago, like maybe a month ago at this point, I watched Hollow Man because it was free to watch on I think Amazon Prime, and I was like, yeah, I haven't watched this movie in a while. So I
Hmm.
watched that one. And then I haven't watched the original in God years, but I mean, like it's classic black and white. Like it's not scary at this point, but
No,
it's still a fun
no.
watch.
I mean, I would argue that it maybe wasn't scary when it came out, but I don't know.
Scared a lot of people when it came out.
Yeah. So with that, seeing some of the originals and seeing this one, I guess where would you personally rank this one compared to the other ones? And do you think it lived up to, kind of like the lore with a
And
fresh new spin?
that's a tough question. Yeah, like it's definitely a fresh new spin. It's very much its own thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because like I was knocking you over, this is not his story, The Invisible Man, and all of the other one, like it very much is his story. Um,
Mm-hmm.
this is her story set in the Invisible Man universe world, whatever. Um, yeah, I mean, I find it a very enjoyable film. I honestly think of it very different because it's so different. Like I can't really say that I can rank it with the other ones
Okay. Yep.
because
That's
it's
fair.
just so different from them in so many aspects. Like I said, I find it enjoyable. It's definitely one of the better shot movies out of any of them. So like if we're gonna rank it that way, like top tier, it's the best
I
shot,
don't think that one's fair.
probably the best acting too. Like Hollow Man's a fun movie, but it's also like not the most well acted film. um so yeah, so no, I think it definitely falls in the upper echelon of certainly better than a number of the other like attempts to remake a universal classic horror icon, because Dracula Untold was crap, I Frankenstein was crap. um Probably the only other one, and apparent a lot of people didn't even love this movie, but I enjoyed it. The only other like retelling of the classic, and in the vein of trying to be classic, the Brendan Fraser Mummy movies do not count. They're their own thing. Um,
I like those movies. I
is
enjoy
like
those.
I think it came out in 2012, The Wolfman, um,
Hmm.
starring Emily Blunt and oh, how am I blanking on his name right now? He is. Hold on.
Let me look it up.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. I think it was 2010, not 2012. It's got Anthony Hopkins, Benicio del Toro. That's what I was blanking on. Like that was a really good, in my opinion, a really good movie and a really good like new, not really new, but like update to that movie, like that classic icon. And then yeah, this one I would put right up there with it in terms of like it successfully redoes the character. It makes it in a good enough fashion. It's well acted, well shot, well done story.
Yeah. I think obviously we have varying opinions on
Very
that.
different opinions.
I do agree that it was really well shot. The acting was really well. I mean, Elizabeth Moss does a really good job with the part in the role that she has.
It. Carries the film easily.
Oh yeah, easily. I mean, she is the main character, so I would hope so.
True.
That was probably half the budget right there.
I'm sure.
But you know, the story, I thought the story could have used a little bit more polish. And obviously from what we were talking about, I think some of those things that, you know, I wish that they would have maybe left in there, maybe would have improved it for me. Obviously I wouldn't know. But yeah, overall, it was just kind of a subpar movie for me. What would you rate it? I'm curious.
Ooh. See, my rating might actually shock you because I've just spent this whole movie or this whole time.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, do you want my rating first?
Yeah, let's hear it.
So immediately I was kind of like thinking 4.5 out of 10.
Oh,
but
wow.
then,
Okay.
Yeah, that's how much I dislike this movie.
Yeah.
But then, you know, after we were talking, it reminded me of the cinematography, the score. I have some gripes with the score too, but I didn't talk about it. I'm not going to. I think I'll have to give it a 6.5 out of 10.
A 6 or a 6.5?
6.5.
6.5. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's just hard to not. It's hard not to give it a little bit higher of a score because of everything else being so well done.
Absolutely. See, what I find interesting about that is you actually nailed my score. That's the exact score. It's not a perfect movie by any means. The acting is good. The cinematography is good. The themes it is addressing, if you're able to pick up on them, apparently, is good. I obviously I have a soft spot in my heart for Leigh Whanell, and I think that's what actually pulls it up to a 6.5. Like I won't even lie, because I was really struggling. I was like 6 or 6.5, 6 or 6.5. I wasn't gonna give it anything less than a 6. But no, I think 6.5 is a solid landing spot for this film. It's good. If I'm gonna throw this caveat out there, you all you know yourself better than anyone, but if you are someone that has a history with a traumatic relationship, there are a lot of news stories that this film triggered some very real PTSD for folks.
Yep.
And some of the way that things get handled. So if you have that, just go into that forewarned. Wow. Go into that warned about what what you might be facing. But yeah, no, a solid 6.5 out of 10. Good film. It's not going to change your life. It's certainly not the.
It certainly changed mine.
Certainly not the creme de la creme. In fact, I think it's the lowest rated movie we've talked about, and we talked about Sonic.
It is. Yeah, I don't remember what I gave Sonic. I think I gave it like an 8.5, whatever.
I think I gave it like a 7 or 7.5.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, Invisible Man, it's good. There's better horror out there. So if you're wanting a good scare, go watch something else. If you're wanting something that's pretty, go watch this.
Yep. No, I agree with John. If you want some classic horror, obviously go see Scream if you haven't already seen it.
It's replaying in a lot of theaters right now.
Oh yeah, go check that out on the big screen. Otherwise, if you want something really intense, I have seen Insidious. I don't have any plans on rewatching that movie. That whet your palate if that's what you're looking for.
Done by James Wan.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, he did. Is in the
James
same.
Wan
And
is the
again,
new master of horror.
it still blows my mind. These crews working together on all these different movies that you wouldn't necessarily.
It's all about who
Connections,
you know,
man.
man.
It's all
Friendships
about who you know.
matter. Friendships matter.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I would say so,
but
John. Right?
God, I can't wait to get a new co-host. No, I'm kidding.
Me too. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking out the show today. Like, subscribe, all that jazz. And we'll see you in the next one.
Stick around for our real Halloween episode.
Yeah. Stick around for my actual scared reaction and not me just laughing at the movie because it's so ridiculous.
All right. Bye.
Bye.